Hi, everybody. It's Michelle Jackson with the Black Writers Workspace Facebook page. We're here to talk to Kent Osbourne about his book. This is the book of the week. I actually purchased this book a couple of weeks ago, finished it in less than a day. I've got Kent here to talk about it. I tell you, there's so much great material in this book. And what I loved about it was just, first and foremost, it's a great story about all the things that you went through. And that was very inspiring to me. And I wanted to talk to you about the writing. But really, when I finished the book, I was so compelled to talk to you because I am the mother of a young Black man. He's 14, he's growing up, he's got a lot of things going on with him. And when I read your book, I thought about all the decisions that you had to make and all the things that you did. And many bad things. You got in a lot of trouble. I went to prison twice, selling drugs, oh my God, stealing, robbing, doing a number of things, pimping at the end. You got me with that one. And I was just reading it and I couldn't put it down because it's such an overcomer's book. That's how I see it. You know, yes. Someone who goes through a lot and then they overcome it and find a new walk and a new way. So before we get into the book, I wanted to have you introduce yourself, tell us about yourself, and then we're gonna really talk about this amazing book, From Prison to Power.
Okay, all right, well, my name is Kent Osbourne with Prison to Power nonprofit organization. Well, she gave me a brief introduction. That's a good introduction for Kent Osbourne, but you know, I'm an author, I'm a life coach, I'm a mentor, I'm an entrepreneur with my own trucking company. And but my life ain't always, you know, been up. And it ain't always been bright. I have my dark days. I lost my dad when I was 5 and my mom when I was 9, and you know, had to go live with my aunt until I was 14 years old. And my aunt and I, we couldn't get along. So I ended up running away from my house at 14 years old and got into the streets. A lot of the things what you just said, you know, the robbing, stealing, snatching purses, you know, getting around the wrong crowd. And I always tell the youth, you know, the people you hang around plays a major important part in your life. You know, and I just started hanging around all these knuckleheads and people that didn't want nothing out of life. So I started not wanting nothing out of life and getting in trouble. Found myself in and out of jail. Went to prison twice. You know, and the second time in prison, I ended up giving my life to Christ the second time in prison. And the rest was history. Here I am now.
This is such an amazing book. It's so much we could talk about the book. I think that everyone should read it simply because of the fact of just the process that you went through. And I always, you know, when I finished it, the first thing I asked myself was, if you hadn't have gone through all the things that you went through, losing your mom and your dad, getting into crime, you know, the people that you grew up around, the things that you did, but, you know, we didn't even talk about the amazing career that, you know, you set forth with music and rapping and different things. So you've had such an amazing, I mean, just full circle in many ways. I mean, opening for Lil Wayne and Pastor Troy, and that's my generation. So, you know, I feel you on that. But I just wonder if you hadn't have gone through all the things that you went through, would that point when you found God, would it have been as meaningful? Have you ever really talked about that?
I've thought about it. I don't think it would have been as meaningful if I haven't went through everything that I've been through. Everything happened for a reason. I believe that God allowed me to go through what I went through for a reason. You know, before I can help save this generation. You know I made a lot of mistakes, and I look at it as if I can take my mistakes and help somebody else so they don't have to make the same mistakes that I made. So I always say to myself, I said, my mistakes are your success. You know what I'm saying? So God allowed me to go through it for a reason.
Yes, he did. And I tell you, when I picked up the book, you know, I couldn't put it down because I kept wanting to know what was going to happen next. I mean, I couldn't. And there were some points in the book and the writing. And I want to say this also is that it doesn't sound like you set out to be a writer. You know, it wasn't like, you know, your whole thing, your whole life was, I got to be a writer. But you wrote this book and you poured so much of yourself into it. And that's what I love about it. Because a good book is going to keep you turning the page. It's going to make you want to asking yourself, what happens next? But there were some places in this book that made me think of who are you as a person, and really I felt like I got to connect with you in a different way. When you talked about all the things you went through, the first time you went to prison, all the different transitions, getting on the bus, going and going through all the process they put you through in order to transition you into the prison system. And you said that you laid on your bed with your chest facing, you know, the ceiling, and you were relieved. You were tired. You had been tired of the crime and the drugs and all those things. And I really would love for you, and I know this is kind of off topic about the book, but you know, what you put in this book, you know, is your heart and soul. And I just would love for you to talk to us about, you know, how you've gone through so much and you still, and you knew that it was tiring to you. It was taxing to you to deal with the things that you dealt with. So when you wrote that in this book, what was going through? I mean, talk to us about that moment of waking up or laying there in that prison cell, and you know you're going to be there 2 years, and you're thinking about what's going to happen in your life further beyond those 2 years, but knowing that you were tired, you were becoming tired of the game in some ways. Talk to us a little bit about that. What was going on with you when you wrote some of that?
Yeah, it was around that time when I was talking about that. It was like when I was out in the streets, I was just tired of running and doing drugs, and my body was just tired. It's like I needed that vacation. I needed that rest, you know, from running so much. And when I was in there, even though I got that rest and I needed that rest, my mindset never changed. I still had that same mindset of wanting to get out and go back to the street. My mindset hadn't changed. That's why I say, you know, I went to prison twice, because I got back out and still got back into the game and went to prison again the second time. But at that moment, I was tired because, like I said, I was doing drugs and running the streets and selling drugs, and I just needed that rest. God allowed things to happen to us to slow us down. I could have died. You know, I could have overdosed. Anything could have happened when I was out there around that time. So when I was locked up that first time and I said that I was tired, I really needed a break because I was just doing too much.
Yeah. There were so many different characters in your book. I mean, I call them characters. They weren't characters. They were real people. They were your cousins and your friends and, you know, Lady J and all these people who really was impactful on your story. And that meant a lot to me, that you could really describe them and give us, kind of take us into your world in a way, you know, take us into your world. And I really do thank you for that. One of the things about the book that really drove home to me your character in many ways is when you know, I'm on page 136 of your page. I mean, I have like less than 10 pages to go. All right. I'm on like 137 or something like that. And I'm thinking to myself, you're in prison again on page 137 of a 145 page book. And I'm asking myself, when is this redemption coming? You know, because I'm reading it to get to the redemption. I'm like, gosh, he's gone through so much. So I'm hungry for your redemption, and I'm on page 137 of 145, and you're just getting to prison. And my mind was like, maybe there's no redemption here. And then you mentioned the man named Matthew, who tells you about a man named Jesus.
Yes.
And that was just so powerful. It was so powerful, because sometimes we think that walk to Christ is, you know, it's lights beaming in the sky, and, you know, all these things are happening. And sometimes it's a subtle man named Matthew who introduced you to a man named Jesus. So talk to us about how that changed your life and how writing then became something of interest to you, because you talked about reading books in prison. You never really talked about writing a book. You did write a lot of rap, and I love rap music, so I do believe that rap music is kind of a prelude to being a writer. If you can write rap, you can, you know, it's poetry. It really is. And so talk to us a little bit about that moment when you found God, and then talk to us how writing began to become something that you wanted to do.
Yeah, so when I was in that second time, after coming from the street and performing with all these major artists, when I talk about opening up for Lil Wayne, opening up for Juvenile, songs with Pastor Troy and Phil Mob, it's like I was traveling all over the Southeast, selling my music out my trunk and doing music. So when I ended up in prison that second time, I couldn't believe it. I was like, man, I'm doing all this traveling, I'm doing good. But really, I wasn't, because I still was selling drugs. So I was doing good and I was doing bad at the same time, and it don't mix. You're either going to do good or you're going to do bad. And I was trying to do both of them. So I found myself back in prison again in 2007. And I'm like, man, I can't believe I'm back in prison again. And I started talking to this guy that I met named Matthew that was in there. And I was telling him everything that I had been through, opening up for Lil Wayne and Juvenile and selling my music out the trunk and performing. I'm telling him all this stuff and how successful I was on the street. But I'm like, man, I'm back in here again. And the guy told me, he said, Kent, listen. He said, bro, if you want to be successful, really successful, he said, bro, you need to give your life to God. He said, I'm telling you, bro, everything that you want out of life, it can happen for you. He said, bro, come to church with me. He said, come to church. See, they had church like 7 days a week in prison. So he said, if you come to church with me, man, I'm telling you, if you give your life to God, anything you want, it can happen for you, bro. So what this guy was telling me was Matthew 6:33. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things shall be added unto you. So I'm telling him, like, man, you saying if I give my life to God and I give my life to God and start worshiping and praising God, that my life would change and I would be successful? He said, yes. And see, all I really wanted to do was music. Music was my passion. So once I started giving my life to God and reading that word, I would write positive music geared towards God, positive rap, with scriptures in it, because I had started reading the Bible, but I still would write negative music over here promoting violence, sex, drugs, and guns. But the more and more I kept going, I started building this personal relationship with Christ. And I started not wanting to write all that negative music that was promoting violence, sex, drugs, and guns, music that would hurt God. I just continued to write music geared towards God, Christian rap music, that I knew that God loved it. And I got away from all that negative music that I was writing. So I gave my life to Christ in prison after having an encounter with this guy telling me, Kent, you want to be successful, you need to give your life to God. So I started going to church, and the rest was history. Gave my life to God.
And that's the power. That's the power, you know, From Prison to Power. Amazing book. I think everybody should definitely read this book, especially if you're raising a young boy. You understand some of the things that you're facing, that young men are facing in this world. You've grown up in an environment that's tough, how to navigate that, how to move beyond it, but also how to find redemption and move your life in a different direction. And you are a great example of that. And I do applaud you on being able to transition, change, you know, just transform to someone who is out here now mentoring young people. You have your own business. We see that you're in your truck. You have a trucking business. Oh, yeah. And so we're just excited. We're excited to see you continue in this direction and to do well. Talk to me a little bit about the writing, though. Where did you get the idea to write the book?
I got the idea to write the book when actually I didn't set out to write a book, but I got the idea to write a book probably like 2 years ago, because I hadn't been through so much. And I'm like, man, I need to write about my life because I want to help some people out. So that's when God gave me the idea to write my book from what I've been through. It never was part of the plan to write a book. So 2 years ago, I decided to write a book.
Wow, that's great. That's great. Well, Kent, thank you so much for joining us. Once again, we have we do have a timing delay between, the questions and your answers. And so, but I want everybody to listen and watch this video. I think it's a great way to do it. The book of the week is From Prison to Power by Kent Osbourne. I'm very, very proud, very happy to meet you. I know you have work to do, and I'm not going to keep you from it. So thank you for joining us today. And thank you for being a part of the Black Writers Workspace. Continue to post, continue to keep us up on what you're doing, where you're going, and we want to support you. Okay?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Have a blessed day.
You too. Bye-bye.